There we go. Hey guys, welcome back to the, still not 100% sure what we're calling this, CDW art stream, right? I think that's it. We're going to continue on with the same project we were doing last week. Ray is still here in the chat as well, so you might, or you probably will hear her pop up from time to time to talk about some stuff. She'll be moderating questions and things like that as well. So yeah, if you've got any questions about what we're going to be doing, it's going to be some Blender today. Any questions about what I'm doing, any questions about the school, feel free to throw them into the chat, and I'll be here clicking on things, and Ray will be on her end clicking on things and making sure everything runs smoothly. And yeah, so I've just, I'll do my best to explain what I'm doing as I go along, but Blender's kind of like a pretty complicated thing, and I'm not particularly good at explaining complicated technical things, but yeah, I'm just going to kind of smash through this, and we're going to try and block out a little bit of a model for this particular thumbnail here, which is one of the ones we did last week. We had this entire sheet of things here, so might try and block that out, might, seeing how far we get, or like whether or not I run into any issues design wise, might block out some of the bike stuff as well, just kind of see how we go. But I think we can probably just spend most of the 2 hours on blocking this ship out with the intent of getting something that we can turn into a cool painting over the next couple of weeks. So yeah, for anyone who uses Blender, I'm going to be using a couple of plugins in here. The first one is the Heavy Poly setup, which I just like because it just changes the way that Blender works a little bit, and I think it's a bit more straightforward for concept stuff. And then I'll be using HardOps and Box Cutter as well to do some Boolean stuff. So yeah, we'll just kind of jump right in with that and see where we get to. So just looking at kind of replicating the shape initially. So first thing I'm going to do here is actually turn this into an object that I can mirror to save myself a bit of time in that regard. And it's really a matter of just trying to, doing this type of block out, just trying to replicate the proportions more so than anything else. That's the most important thing at this stage, is proportions, and then keeping everything nice, because if you get the proportions wrong, you make your life harder later on down the track. This mouse has got an incredibly loud scroll button on it, so I apologize if that is coming over the microphone. And I'm just, well, one of the things that whenever I'm doing this type of modeling, that I'm always trying to figure out is like also just thinking in my head like how I'm actually going to construct this in 3D. So I'm kind of like looking at the cockpit area of this versus the rest of the ship, and just kind of thinking that it's probably going to be easier to actually build that, at least for the block in, as a separate piece. So I think we'll probably do that. So we'll kind of build these all as separate pieces. We can always join them back together if we need to. So I'm going to leave some of this as just like sheets of geo, other bits will turn into actual objects, right up until I'm kind of happy with where everything is. And actually there is one other add-on that I want to turn on here, which is, I think it's that one, which actually comes with Blender. Just add some extra stuff to it, yeah, because what it does is it opens up this offset, where is it? There it is, offset edges thing, which is like super handy. Basically just makes a copy of the edge that you just had, but with a offset on it if you need, which means that it keeps everything nice and smooth.
So do you prefer Blender or Maya?
I don't know Maya, so Blender is definitely my preference in that regard. And I think honestly for the type of work that I do, even if I did know Maya, I think, I mean, I don't know, I'm speculating because like I said, I don't know Maya at all. Blender, just the way that I've learnt to have it set up is just so much quicker than what I've seen other people do, for instance, in Maya with this type of modeling. Yeah, they're two very, in a lot of ways, they're two very different ways of thinking about doing it, and also like this type of modeling that I'm doing here is like absolutely not good modeling. It's just really quick and dirty, and it gets the job done, which for concept work is totally fine. For anything else, it's not So yeah, I mean, Maya is in some regards is probably far more powerful than Blender is, because it's just got such a strong kind of like history of within production modeling and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's really in some regards just a matter of personal preference, and Blender's the one that I picked up. I think Blender's probably easier to learn at least at a base level than Maya is. I think the learning curve on Maya is probably way more difficult. But again, I'm not speaking from experience on that, so I could be wrong. I could just be an idiot. So just kind of using some of these little cylinders as markers as well, like just kind of, they're representing space. They're not really. And then I can kind of like place things around and make sure everything's kind of working relatively well. But yeah, lots of like copying bits, because the nice thing with this is if you duplicate out geometry that has, like, for instance, a mirror modifier on it, that modifier stays on the piece, so you've always got that that modifier there for the next piece as well, which just makes things really quick. And then because Blender is mostly one of the things I really like about Blender is that it's all keyboard shortcuts, which means that's unfortunate. Oh, okay. Apparently I already duplicated that. But yeah, there's heaps of I mean, the nice thing is in all the tools are getting easier to learn and easier to use, which for concept artists is an awesome thing, because it just means we've got so many kind of tools that we have access to now, which means that we can do more cool stuff without having to learn a billion things. Just kind of like checking how, even though these forms are super simple, I always just like to see how they receive light even at this point, because it just kind of lets you get an idea as to whether or not this is going to be useful. This is another use case for that offset edges thing that's really handy as well, because I want to basically make these little kind of like guidance flaps out the side here, something like that. And you know, like pulling out a portion of a circle like this, there's a bunch of ways you could do it. You could kind of like duplicate the whole thing and then scale it from the middle, and that's technically giving you the offset, and then, you know, take those bits and rip them out. So you're left with that, which is, you know, a nice scaled up version of that line. You could take these three, like set your 3D cursor to the middle of that, take these three, duplicate them, and then scale them from the cursor. Whoops, they're not set there. Missed one there. Anyway, you know, that's one way. The other way to do it, but like having this offset edges thing is like huge because it just lets you do it in one click, which is really nice. Actually, let's do that. In a few spots. Oops. Along the bottom. Cool. We can just extrude them all out at the same time. And then scale all out at the same time as well. And then actually, smarter thing, well, separate these out into their own object. Actually, let's just delete half of them and mirror that object. Give them all a little bit of thickness, and this is also kind of like a design where a little bit of wonkiness does not really matter, but at least at this stage I'm just going to try and keep it relatively accurate. Here's a tip that I always forget, is that if you've got a mirror modifier in Blender and you're wanting this like section to be welded, just make sure that you don't have faces on the inside surface that needs to weld, because otherwise it'll do funky stuff later on. So yes. And also just going to move these across to make sure they're actually going to clip properly. There we go, nice. Snap. And it's like, for instance, if you're going to do like a subdiv or anything on it like that, if you've got a face on the inside, you'll get weird pinching and stuff like that. So cool. Let's just fix up that. A little bit needs to sit a bit higher. That's just really gross shape, so we'll get rid of that. And probably will end up doing a little bit of a subdivision surface on this main body bit, because it is going to be relatively relatively rounded. It's going to be easier than trying to model it in with anything else. And we've got a deal, we've got this big kind of cutout in the middle. I'm just probably just going to do that with a boolean. I think that's going to be easier. So let's work on making that shape. At least for now, anyway. Cool. So there's still some funniness going on there, but that's all right. And there's a tab. Some weird pinching going on there. Oh, hang on. Do we have? Yes, we do. So that's that same issue I was talking about. Those interior faces need to not be doing that, and then when we re-subdivide that, it looks fine, so that's good. Just add some little control loops down the bottom here. So what that's doing is this subdivision surface, which is basically taking everything and kind of subdividing each of these polygons. Adding control loops to those will basically mean that we get, instead of a really rounded shape like that, the closer these two edges sit together, we can kind of like build a sharper edge along there. So we can add a control loop like that. The other way of doing it is using an edge sharp, or an edge crease rather, which allows you to select that edge, and then Shift E will allow you to pull down an edge crease. You get, you know, it's kind of the same difference. Creases are a little bit more powerful, but they can also cause some issues. So at least for the start, it's just a little bit easier to do it with some control edges like that. Maybe one up there. Maybe just sit one in the middle there to keep that a little bit flatter. One up there, and then just going to use the knife tool to push another edge in here. That. Just work on kind of mucking around with how this front shape looks. If we want to build like a little bit of a ridge, for instance, up here, we can push these slide these vertices around. And create a little bit of a ridge, which could look kind of cool. If we want less of a ridge here, then we can kind of pull these ones down a little bit further away, so that kind of softens that a little bit more. Then I want to build a little strip. Let's just add a plane in here. And mirror that. Just to create that little kind of apron at the front there. Those interior faces again. Do this one with slightly less subdivisions because we don't really need them all at the moment. It's a little bit of an extra kind of bulge out the top here, I think would be kind of cool. And just going to take these faces, duplicate them. And separate them out. Turn off the subdivision. Put like a little cut in there and then delete that. so I can start getting a good base for building out the frame that could go around this as well. So I'm just going to make the top of this needs to be a little bit more vertical. Control loop there just to give us a little bit more definition on the sides. Do I have any tip? I'm assuming that means tips on maintaining productivity when working from home. That's a tricky one. On it, like, in all honesty, I don't know if I'm the best person in the world to answer that question because I'm pretty bad at it. I mean, I think. Yeah, I figured that was you, Carsten. I can tell by the name. I don't know. I think like the biggest thing to figure out is to kind of like figure out the way in which your brain likes to be like comfortable and like in a good flow when you're working. I think some people are really good at, or like they thrive more so when they're in like a really quiet environment. Other people, I think, thrive a little bit more when they're in a slightly more active environment. I know I'm definitely the latter. I kind of like don't like having dead silence around me when I'm working, whether it's in a room by myself or with other people. It's obviously not nice to be distracted, but yeah, like some people need to, like, for instance, listen to music or whatever, and other people just, if they have music on or something, it actually really kills their workflow. For me, it's I don't know if that really helps stop procrastination per se, but maybe it does a little bit. If you're procrastinating because you struggle to get into a good rhythm with your work, then maybe that helps. I mean, yeah, it is a tricky one. I think everyone deals with procrastination in some way and has to deal with it in a different way. But having a good process is I think really important as well. Probably like, you know, if you, for instance, like my process with a design like this is I do some crappy little thumbnail sketches like this, and then I'll jump into 3D and muck around with that until I hit a wall creatively in that regard. So maybe there's a problem that I can't fix in 3D just yet. Maybe it's something that's, you know, would take a long time to model in 3D or whatever. So that whenever I'm doing this, I'm kind of looking at it and going, okay, at some point I'm going to have to render this out really quickly, take it into Photoshop, figure out how to solve the next design issue. You know, and I know that's my process. And especially with like professional work, I try as little as possible to introduce new tools into my workflow. Like, you don't want to be doing that unless it's something you're really comfortable with. Like if it's a tool you haven't used much, like I think that's a really good way to kick yourself out of a good concentrative, that's not a word, but you know, a good kind of flow in that regard. Yeah, so I think it's really the best tip I can give anyone for how to not procrastinate as much is figure out what it is that is actually causing you to procrastinate. And I think a lot of that is got more to do with just being like honest with yourself. Like if you know it's something like, oh, you know, I've never done something like this before, so I'm just scared that I might screw it up in some way. You know, then, you know, maybe the solution to that is like go and, you know, like actively seek out help from someone who you think can give you, you know, that the reassurance or the, you know, the tip on the particular type of thing you're doing. That I think that can often be a big thing. I think a lot of procrastination often comes from just like not being sure of what it is you're trying to achieve. So if that's the case, like find a way to figure that out. I know when I first started working, I was always a little bit, it's a silly, like it sounds really dumb now, but like whenever I was working for a new client when I was younger, I was always a little bit, you didn't want to like make it, if you had questions about a design or something, you didn't want to necessarily always ask because you're like, oh man, I feel like I should know the answer to this. But you know, if you haven't done something before, or if like your client's brief is not, yeah, there's like a hole in it somewhere where you're like, man, that could mean anything, like ask the question. Because if you find yourself sitting there kind of umming and ahhing about a design choice because you have absolutely no idea if it's suitable for what you're trying to do, then ask. Like that's the worst thing you can do is kind of just give up and go like, oh, I guess I'll never know the answer to this question. Yeah, you've just got to ask the question in that regard. But yeah, one thing I didn't really recognize that it was a thing until I heard it somewhere or someone told me, I can't remember. But like, I used to just listen, I like to listen to music when I'm working. And I didn't realize how much of a difference it makes listening to music that has, that's not what I wanted. Music that has lyrics and music that doesn't have lyrics, or at least has like nonsensical lyrics. It's really quite strange. But yeah, if you're listening to like, I just need to flip these faces. There we go. If you're listening to music that has no lyrics to it, you're more likely to just allow it to be something that exists in your subconscious. Like you don't attach yourself to the lyrics or anything like that, which can actually be really distracting. So yeah, it's actually like, even, you know, could be like, I know a lot of people like listening to classical music because of that, the fact that it doesn't have lyrics. Or, you know, like jazz. I really like jazz. I listen to a lot of jazz when I'm working. But yeah, that was a big thing because again, it's not really procrastination, but it was like I would listen to just whatever music I liked at the time, and then I would just find myself losing focus, and I never really made the association. Let's not do that, Windows. How about no? The worst software feature ever invented. Windows auto restarts. yeah, that was a weird thing. And I was like, okay. And then I just started not listening to music with lyrics within it, in it. And I was like, man, it does make a difference. Maybe. I think listening to me is probably more likely to put you to sleep, but anyway. I know for a fact that I have an incredibly monotone voice. So if you wake up in 2 hours and the stream is over, I apologize. Did it change my taste in music much? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I just kind of like. I've always liked jazz anyway, so I just didn't. It was probably more like it definitely stopped me from listening to as many podcasts when I work. That was the thing, because I was like looking. I don't know. I was like looking to be entertained while I worked, which is like not a bad thing, but it's like not really the point. I don't think it really changed my taste in music. I just kind of like there was a time and a place. And the other thing that I like, even with music now when I'm listening to it and I'm working, like there are times when I don't need to be like as focused. You know, if I'm just like finishing off a line drawing over the top of a sketch or something, and it's, you know, it's relatively mindless work where I'm just, you know, making sure that my shapes are okay and blah blah blah. It's nothing that I'm really thinking hugely about a design or anything like that. Then you know, I could, you know, whack on an episode of a TV show or something like that. You know, so it's not that you just always have to put yourself in this like hugely zen state of mind. It's just there are times when you're doing the really tricky design work that you're like, yes, I need to probably be not, you know, trying to concentrate on two things at once. And that's like actually having taught as well, I've definitely recognized that sometimes as like, and I think this is the hardest part of it, is like I've definitely spoken to students before where you can tell they're having an issue with their productivity, and they are, you know, they're clearly not focusing enough when they're working. And the classic line is that they're like, I need to have something on in the background, otherwise I can't work. And a lot of the times what that actually means is I need to have something on in the background because it makes me feel comfortable, because I've always got something that I can distract myself with when I'm challenged by the work that I'm doing. And that's fine, but it can get in the way. You know, you kind of have to get used to, hey, this is going to be hard. You may feel uncomfortable doing it, but you need to at least be present in feeling uncomfortable, because then you can actually concentrate on the problem you have. If you just go, oh no, I need to have it there because otherwise I can't focus, it's like that tends to be a little bit of a convenient mistruth, which actually translates to, I'm just feeling uncomfortable with this work at the moment because it's new to me. And part of like learning this is like getting good at recognizing that you may feel uncomfortable because you will be doing something hard and it's not easy. But that's fine. Like, that's the way that it goes. So yeah, That's a big thing. I don't know if that's a tip or if that's just an observation, but all right, I'm gonna actually I need to load in one other add-on here. Sorry, I'm on like a different machine than what I'm usually on, so I don't have all of my add-ons immediately loaded up here. But Machine Tools is another great one. It is also free. And I literally use it for like one thing, which is the Align Pie. Because it's got this great align tool which allows you to not just align things like top and bottom, but actually like straighten them. So between, like, for instance, 4 of these vertices, with heavy poly you've got pretty limited align tools where you can like align them all to like the top, for instance, which just flattens them to like an average. But what the align tool does with Machine Tools is if you have a series of verts like this, Straighten will align them between the first and the last vertices, which is actually really handy because it allows you to build up shapes without, like, you know that it's right without having to fight too much. And then if I'm just, for instance, moving these on the x-axis, now I know that I'm still maintaining this nice edge along here. And I've been fiddling around with that piece for way too long. Cool, alright, let's build this little arm that kind of goes out the back here. So my process for that has got way too many vertices in it, but that's alright. Process for this kind of stuff is I usually just steal a vertice from another piece, and especially for this type of modeling, I then just like start. I'm just using Control and click here to just extrude these vertices out to my wherever I click, which allows me to build up shapes really quickly like that. And then what we'll do with these is we'll just use box cutter to cut some shapes out of these. So this is where box cutter is super handy, because you can just start to very quickly rip these shapes out really nicely. Just use some really kind of agricultural modeling techniques here. This is not good practices, but it doesn't matter. It will get us what we need. No, that will cut through everything. I don't want to do that. Let's quickly separate that. Cut that there. Rejoin. Add a tiny bevel to this, which I'll probably end up doing to everything anyway, because it just makes everything a bit cleaner. And then we'll do a smart apply on that to get rid of boolean, which allows us to have, for instance, this shape here. Snap that and snap that to hello. That this there. Oops. I'm gonna take these. To that. Oops. No. What's the face orientation on that? Ah, that explains that. Flip that. Oh, oops. That's not what I require. Cool. Oh man. Like modeling on a mouse that I don't usually use, and it is killing my hand. Buy a good mouse, people. That's my tip. Cool, so let's just so I'm kind of over modeling this, but you know, that kind of thing just gives us a nice silhouette in there. Just kind of cool. Here, that's what I wanted. And I probably shouldn't start chopping that up just yet. Some booleans to that. That as well. Give us a nicer look in there. And steal that guy, separate out, delete the subsurf and that, and let's just put a couple of these. Pipes in there. That kind of changing where these pipes went, to be honest. This is slightly different to the thumbnail, but I'm kind of working off a little bit more of what I want to do. I'm also looking at the model rather than the thumbnail at the moment. Oh, the mirror not come across. Strange, but all fixed now. That's a bit weird. Why is that? Maybe that was why. Because there are two. Not sure why that is happening. Undo. Cool. Very strange. Maybe we do just start chopping into this a little bit more. And let's like cut the bevel on this. No, let's put a little bevel on here, and then let's start chopping that up a bit. Let's go do the same thing. That's very annoying. Okay, let's apply this boolean then. Let's just be done with it. Oh wait, of course. That means we have to apply the subsurface as well. That's alright. Let's just do that, and then it'll be okay. Apparently it won't. Okay. Okay, so that's heavier than I wanted, but that's alright, we'll keep that shape there. Could be the double overlapping, but those ones weren't overlapping. That's the weird thing. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's just concept mesh. We'll sort it out later if we have to. So yeah, let's add the bevel to that. Oh, not too much, just a little bevel, which is going to cause some of these to start to fly away, but that's okay. Fix that later, don't really care. Let's cut this little hatch out of the front, which gives us that. Cool. And then let's cut this other one. Not as, oops. Where's that drawing as a shape? Now everything's gone. What the heck? If it works, it works. Sure. Cool. So yeah, plenty of. Is that? That's creating a weird. No. Okay, I think I've done something funny to box cutter here. I'm just going to save this as well because I have not done that. Cool. I'm just going to restart Blender just in case I've done something funky to box cutter here. There we go. I must have hit something. Nice. So heaps of flyaways on that, but that's okay. So let's just cut, so they should. Oh, no. They should all be separate pieces now, so we can muck around with them as we see fit. If we wanted to, we could go through and just merge some of these. Just leave that for later because it's kind of a boring, busy job which doesn't really affect the design all that much. Dissolve. I'm going to turn these into mesh too, so we'll just dissolve a few of these edges where we're getting overlap. It's slightly different diameters just to make it a little bit more interesting. Can convert them to mesh, set the shade smooth, so we get some nice, interesting looking pipes in there. Let's take this edge and offset that. Bridge it to that to get a nice shape, and then we'll extrude. Oh, that was the wrong one. Oop, okay, oops. Oh, we got some funky. Better. Turn that into a subdivision surface as well. A couple of control loops in here just to sharpen that out so we get some nice smoothing, but only where we want it. Making this a little bit thinner. Cool. That's definitely not perfect, but it's good enough for now. Vaguely have a look at what that does in terms of the silhouette as that being glass. Let's turn this into an object. Clip ring, that should all be locked together. Whoops, we've got to make a polygon out of that. Cool. Looks fine. Go in and steal that. Make a little shroud over the top of that. Mirror that there. Cool. And extrude that. Shape. Yeah, looks better as a cutoff. It's all good. Let's grab these again. Let's offset those. Box cutter on that just to get the shape we want. And a lot of this becomes like a little bit of detailing. There's still like proportionally, I'm pretty happy with where it sits. It's really just, I don't know if I need that piece actually. We just need something a little bit more interesting there. Let's take that and say that there. Wait, no. Set both of them at the same time. You cannot. We can do that. Let's join. Oh wait, multi word here. Cool. Yeah, that's more interesting. Let's do something like that. Kind of wrap around relatively close. That's cool. I wonder if we can bridge these two. Oh wait, they need to be the same object. Nice. And then two options. Yeah, that becomes pretty cool. Little shape. We can move around where that is exactly, but that's cool. Just mirror that across. Oops. Always forget to turn box cutter off, and you have to be careful with that because it likes to crash Blender on occasion. Alright, let's sharpen. Bevel these a little bit. Let's do some really turn box cutter back on. Do some really kind of like cheesy slice cuts in here. And need to make a quick little bracket shape. Oh, okay. Well, let's go phases. Anyway, I'm worrying about things that I don't need to worry about. Do something like that. Actually, try something a little bit different for this one. Just do like a little insert cut instead of a full cut through. I think that actually looks a bit better. Yes, that's much better. Oh. Oh, this one's modifier is gone. Ah, it's because I did smart apply. Smart apply. Let's just delete that and remove that all. Cool. Make down the same object, mirror them across as well. Yes, yeah, we're starting to build a little bit of extra detail out on this. So. Again, these booleans kind of breaking things, but that needs to be mirrored now that we don't have the mirror on that. But let's key 1, yep, good. Taper that slightly. Oof, no, that's not gonna work. One of the slightly frustrating things about booleans is that you do often have to just fudge around with them a little bit. And they do create all these weird flyaway edges, which you can fix a little bit more at the end, but you do get used to it. And a bit more. Subdivision in that shape, just to make it a bit more interesting. Come in here and add some little mirror that. Some little cuts in here. And all those little panel gaps and stuff that help make things like this look a little bit more realistic, nuts and bolts and all that kind of stuff. Little engine details. Cool, this is where box cutter really comes into its own. It just allows you to make all these tiny little cuts, which again kind of destroy your topology, but allow you to make some kind of creative decision making that usually in polymodeling is kind of time consuming. Bevel on that. Save this again. Still need to think about exactly what kind of coloring and stuff I want to put on here, but at least just marking these different materials now gives me somewhat of an idea of how it affects the overall design. Jam that in there, I think. Just probably about as good as it needs to be. There, let's bevel that edge. This is where that straighten comes in really handy from machine tools, just allows me to smooth that out a little bit more Actually, let's, oops. Let's just leave it like that. That's probably okay. Can't do that, can we? 2 those doubles. Then maybe we can do that. Never more than that anyway. Okay, that's fine. Doesn't matter. Insets in there. And, this is probably gonna break. No, it's not. Okay, cool. Excellent. It's not exactly the shape I need, but at least I know it'll work. Oh, I might just have to be really careful with the overlaps there. Maybe let's just try and do that with just a cylinder. Probably give us the nicest. The nicest one. Yeah, cool. All right, now we can move that up to there. A little bit bigger, so we have this nice kind of joint in the back. Cool. So we're starting to really get like most of the main shapes kind of working here. I wonder if this would work. That might be a bit much. Oops. No, overdraw that a little bit more. There we go. Make that a slice. Run that in there a little bit, which will let us get a nice, yeah, cool. So we're going to push that in a bit like that. Get a nice little cut in. Here we can come along and do. So I guess we could do this with a. Done that with a cut anyway. Nice fun little detail at the back there. Running down. Let me just turn my shadow resolution up here so I can actually see what's going on in the shadows. Cool, and then actually not done this because I knew I was going to do it at some point. Anyway, one of the things that me and Alex had spoken about was potentially putting two little kind of spheres in here that can kind of sit as little turret launchers. And sorry, let's hide that. Unhide that. Try and do a live subtraction on here. Let's see if this works. Yes, excellent. Don't think it's going to be visible, so it probably doesn't matter, but yeah, you might see a little bit of it there, I guess. Yeah, just kind of like keep the magnet kind of idea for this working again. Now I wonder if I can. Oops. That's going to be terribly broken, but just as kind of like a proof of concept for myself, that's kind of the idea, is to be able to get some sort of patterning on there. tasks in that way. Cool, okay. For now, let's not do that. That's the idea, okay. Cool, and then have some sort of little turret thing. On there. No, that needs to be from screen space. So it actually goes back on the right axis. Cool. It's the wrong one. So that's a pretty rudimentary shape at the moment, but it'll do for now. It's looking pretty interesting from the back. I think it's not too bad. Always forget to mirror those. Cool, I'm just gonna copy all that. Throw that in there for now, just a bit of detail. Layer that across the side. That, hang on. That needs to get mirrored across. So that's kind of getting there. All that stuff. Still some fiddly things, but again, for this at the moment, we're just going to try and build this up enough so we can kind of throw it into a painting or something like that. Still need to work on this shape up here a little bit. Not super happy with that. A couple of other details here and there. But overall, working pretty well at the moment. And yeah, you can kind of see that in a bit of lighting on there kind of starts to take on some nice forms. Especially if we get some cool detailing, some nice cut lines on those spheres in there, I think that'll start to look really nice. Cool. A little bit of a bevel on that, can start to cut up some nice panel lines in here as well. Just some nice little silhouette changes in here. And like the nice thing about this is it does give you a different shape, so you can put different materials on stuff like this and really start to, especially if we change like a color on here. I don't know what color this craft will be, but Let's get some nice kind of variation between metals and stuff like that. It's a little bit less rough. Just have to have some fun with that and actually get some cool looking stuff out of that. So that's kind of what we've got ahead of us, is just a little bit more detailing, kind of playing around with these shapes a bit more. You know, this is not modeling for the sake of making a final model, it's modeling for the concept side of things. So really, yeah, just looking at building up something cool. We might do like another that, and we can make this chrome or something like that, you know, get some cool stuff happening like that, build up some really nice details. Didn't mean to do that. Yeah, all this is stuff we can keep mucking around with. I did that asymmetrically, that's all right. Keep mucking around with next week, really, because we are coming up to the end of our little session here today. Just make all these things chrome again. Yeah, but I think we are making some decent progress on this guy. So I think there's some little other details, maybe some little headlamps in there. Just looking at the thumbnail, there's a few other little shapes that can be cut out and finessed, but I think probably next week we'll be able to have this well and truly done, and then from there we can render this out, chuck it into maybe a little bit of a scene, maybe just kit bash something together, a bit of a scene to have this thing flying around. Yeah, render it out, have it in Photoshop, paint over, and make it look cool. But yeah, probably leave it there for now, I think. So thanks for sticking around if you're still here, asking some questions, and yeah, we'll keep going with this guy next week. See what we get to. All right, thanks everyone. We'll see you then.